Black single dad offered shelter to his single mom CEO in storm. What happened next is shocking. The windshield wipers of Vanessa Clark's black Mercedes screamed against the glass, fighting a losing battle against the sheets of rain hammering down from the darkened sky. Lightning split the horizon every few seconds, illuminating the empty highway that stretched endlessly before her. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles white against the leather as another gust of wind threatened to push her luxury car off the road. Come on, she muttered, squinting through the chaos. The GPS had lost signal 20 minutes ago, leaving her with nothing but instinct and the fading memory of road signs she'd barely noticed in her rush to get home from the Chicago board meeting. Vanessa Clark wasn't used to being unprepared. As the CEO of Clark Industries, a multi-million-dollar consulting firm, she controlled every detail of her life with military precision. Her days were scheduled in 15-minute increments, her calls returned within the hour, and her problems solved before most people even knew they existed. But Mother Nature, it seemed, didn't care about her quarterly projections or the emergency board meeting she'd just survived. The storm had come from nowhere, or rather, she'd been too buried in conference calls to check the weather. One minute she was cruising along Highway 87, planning her next strategic move, and the next she was trapped in what felt like the end of the world. A massive crack of thunder shook the car, and Vanessa's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd been driving for 3 hours through this nightmare, and her gas gauge was dancing dangerously close to empty. The last town she'd passed was 40 miles back, and she couldn't even remember its name. Then, like a mirage in the storm, she saw it, a flickering neon sign through the rain that read, "Welcome to Cedar Falls, population 847. Relief flooded through her chest. A town. People. Help. But as she took the exit ramp, her relief turned to horror. The Mercedes began to shudder, then cough, then die completely. The engine light blazed red on her dashboard as the car rolled to a pathetic stop on the shoulder of the small town's main street. No, no, no! Vanessa pounded the steering wheel, but the car was as finished as her cell phone, which showed 0 bars and a rapidly draining battery. She was stranded. Through the rain-streaked windows, Cedar Falls looked like something from another century. Small wooden houses lined the street, their porch lights creating warm yellow pools in the darkness. A few local businesses, a diner, a hardware store, a post office, sat dark and shuddered against the storm. Not exactly the kind of place where a woman in a $2,000 business suit would blend in. Vanessa had two choices: sit in her finished car all night, or venture out into the storm and hope someone would help her. Neither option appealed to her, but hypothermia seemed worse than awkward social interaction. She grabbed her purse, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the rain. The cold hit her like a slap. Within seconds, her perfectly styled hair was plastered to her head, and her Italian leather shoes were soaked through. She ran toward the nearest house with lights on, a modest 2-story home with a wraparound porch and a child's bicycle leaning against the railing. Before she could second-guess herself, she was pounding on the front door. The door opened, and Vanessa found herself face-to-face with a man who seemed to embody everything her corporate world wasn't. He was tall and lean, with kind eyes and the kind of quiet strength that came from real work, not gym memberships. His dark skin glistened with raindrops from where he'd apparently been checking his porch in the storm, and he wore a simple flannel shirt that had seen better days. "Ma'am?" His voice was calm, steady. "You all right?" "I'm sorry to bother you," Vanessa said, shivering as water dripped from her hair. "My car broke down, and my phone's dead. I was wondering if I could use your phone to call a tow truck or—" "Phone lines are down," the man said, studying her with eyes that seemed to take in everything: her expensive clothes, her desperation, her complete fish-out-of-water situation. "Cell towers too. Storm knocked out most of the infrastructure about an hour ago." Vanessa's heart sank. "Is there a hotel? Somewhere I can wait until morning?" The man glanced past her at the storm, which seemed to be getting worse by the minute. Tree branches were bending at impossible angles, and the rain was coming down so hard it looked like a gray wall. "Motel's been closed for 2 years," he said. And even if it wasn't, you wouldn't want to drive in this. Trees are coming down all over the county. They stood there for a moment, the stranger clearly weighing his options while Vanessa tried not to let her desperation show. She was used to solving problems with money, connections, or authority. Here, she had none of those tools. Look, the man said finally, stepping aside. I don't normally do this, but you can't stay out there. Come in, get dry. We'll figure out the rest in the morning. Vanessa hesitated. Every instinct she'd developed in 15 years of cutthroat business told her to be careful. This was exactly the kind of situation her security team warned her about: isolated, vulnerable, dependent on a stranger. But what choice did she have? That's very kind of you, she said, stepping across the threshold into warmth and light. The house was simple but clean, with worn furniture that looked comfortable rather than stylish. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator, and a small pair of rain boots sat by the door next to much larger work boots. The smell of something hearty cooking drifted from the kitchen. I'm Malik, the man said, closing the door against the wind. Malik Johnson. Vanessa, she replied, then caught herself. In her world, people knew exactly who she was before she entered a room. Here, she was just a stranded stranger. Vanessa Clark? Malik nodded politely, but something flickered across his face, so quickly she almost missed it. Recognition? No, that was impossible. She'd never been to this town before, and Malik Johnson didn't exactly fit the profile of someone who would move in her circles. Let me get you a towel, he said, his voice carefully neutral. And some dry clothes if you want them. Well, I have some things that might fit. As he headed upstairs, Vanessa looked around the modest living room. Despite her circumstances, her business mind automatically cataloged details. The house was well maintained but clearly lived in by someone on a budget. Hand-me-down furniture, generic brand items, but everything spotlessly clean and organized. A single father, maybe, given the children's items and the way he'd hesitated when mentioning clothes. But something nagged at her. When she'd said her name, Malik's reaction hadn't been the polite blankness of someone meeting a stranger. It had been something else entirely. Daddy? Who's here? A small voice from the stairs made Vanessa turn. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, peeked around the corner. She had her father's eyes and wore pajamas covered in cartoon stars. Just someone who got caught in the storm, baby, Malik called from upstairs. Go back to bed. The girl studied Vanessa with the frank curiosity of childhood. Are you from the big city? You look like the people on TV. Before Vanessa could answer, Malik reappeared with an armload of clothes and towels. Ava, bed. Now. But Daddy. Now, sweetheart. The little girl, Ava, scampered back upstairs, but not before giving Vanessa one last curious look. Sorry about that, Malik said, handing her the towels. Kids, you know? Actually, Vanessa didn't know. She never had children, never even seriously considered them. Her life was her company, and her company was her life. But there had been something sweet about the little girl's open curiosity. Bathrooms down the hall, Malik continued. Take your time. I'll make some coffee. As Vanessa changed into the borrowed clothes, sweatpants and a university t-shirt that were clearly a woman's, she tried to shake the feeling that something was off. Malik was polite, helpful, even kind. But there was a guardedness about him, a careful distance that felt like more than just normal caution around strangers. When she emerged from the bathroom, she could hear him moving around in the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with whatever he'd been cooking, and despite everything, her stomach rumbled. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten anything that wasn't from a boardroom catering spread. Feel better? Malik asked as she entered the kitchen. He'd set out a steaming mug of coffee and was stirring something in a pot on the stove. Much, thank you. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug, grateful for both the heat and something to do with her hands. This is very kind of you. Most people wouldn't. Most people wouldn't help a stranger? Malik's smile was polite but didn't quite reach his eyes. Maybe that says something about the kind of people you usually meet. There it was again, that subtle edge to his voice, as if every word was carefully chosen. Vanessa studied him over her coffee cup. In her experience, people were usually eager to impress her, to make connections, to drop hints about business opportunities. Malik seemed determined to maintain as much distance as possible while still being hospitable. "You're probably right," she said. "In my line of work, you learn to be cautious." "And what line of work is that?" "Consulting. Corporate strategy, mainly." Malik nodded, his expression giving nothing away. "Must keep you busy." "It does." Vanessa found herself wanting to fill the silence, to bridge whatever invisible gaps stretched between them. "What about you? What do you do here in Cedar Falls?" "Whatever needs doing," Malik said simply. "Handyman work, some carpentry. Small town, you know? People wear a lot of hats." The storm continued to rage outside, rattling the windows and howling around the corners of the house. In the warm kitchen, with the coffee and the smell of home-cooked food, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. But Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling that Malik Johnson was hiding something. And in her experience, when people hid things, it was usually because the truth was more complicated than it appeared. Morning came slowly to Cedar Falls, filtered through gray clouds that still threatened rain. Vanessa woke in the guest room to the sound of small feet pattering down the hallway and hushed voices from the kitchen below. For a moment she forgot where she was, the unfamiliar ceiling, the handmade quilt, the simple furniture so different from her minimalist penthouse apartment. Then it all came rushing back, the storm, the breakdown, Malik Johnson's unexpected kindness. She checked her phone. Still no signal, but at least it had charged overnight thanks to the power coming back on some time before dawn. Through the window, she could see her Mercedes sitting forlornly on the main street, looking as out of place as she felt. Downstairs, she found Malik at the stove making pancakes while Ava sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs and coloring in a workbook. The little girl looked up when Vanessa entered, her face lighting up with the kind of unguarded enthusiasm only children possessed. "Good morning," Ava chirped. "Daddy's making his special pancakes. They're way better than the ones at school." "Ava," Malik warned gently, not turning from the stove. "Let our guest wake up first." But Vanessa found herself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in weeks. "Good morning, Ava. What are you working on there?" "Math homework," Ava said, making a face. "It's boring. Tell me about the big city. Do you really live in one of those tall buildings like on TV? Have you ever seen a famous person? Do you have a pool on your roof?" "Ava, enough questions," Malik said, finally turning around. He'd already showered and dressed in clean jeans and a button-down shirt that, while simple, fit him well. There was something about the way he carried himself, a quiet confidence that reminded Vanessa of the executives she worked with, though she couldn't put her finger on why. "It's okay," Vanessa said, settling into a chair across from Ava. "Yes, I live in a tall building. No pool on the roof, but there is one on the 20th floor. And I've met a few famous people, I suppose." Ava's eyes went wide. "What's it like? Living so high up?" Vanessa considered the question. "Quiet," she said finally. "You're above all the noise of the street. Sometimes it feels like you're floating above the world." "That sounds lonely," Ava said with the brutal honesty of childhood. The observation hit harder than Vanessa expected. "Sometimes it is," she admitted. Malik set a plate of pancakes in front of her, and the smell made her stomach growl audibly. "These look amazing," she said. "Thank you. Coffee's fresh," he said, already pouring her a cup. "I wasn't sure how you take it." "Black is fine." She took a sip and nearly groaned with pleasure. It was perfectly brewed, rich and smooth, nothing like the bitter sludge from the office machine. "This is excellent coffee. What brand do you use?" Something flickered across Malik's face again. "Just something I picked up in the city last time I was there." Vanessa looked more closely at the coffee maker on the counter. It was a high-end Italian espresso machine, the same model she had in her own kitchen. Easily a $2,000 piece of equipment, and completely out of place in this modest kitchen. "That's quite a machine," she said carefully. Malik shrugged. "Got it second-hand. Previous owner took good care of it." But his tone had that same careful quality from the night before, as if every word was being weighed and measured. "Daddy knows all about good coffee," Ava chimed in. "He says it's because he used to work with important people who were very picky about their coffee." "Ava." Malik's voice was sharp enough that his daughter looked up in surprise. "Eat your breakfast." Vanessa caught the exchange, filing it away with her other observations. A man who'd worked with important people, but now did handyman work in a town of 847. It wasn't impossible, but it was curious. After breakfast, while Malik walked Ava to the school bus stop, Vanessa offered to clean up. As she moved around the kitchen, she noticed more small details that didn't quite fit. The knife block held professional-grade blades. The dish soap was an expensive organic brand. And tucked behind the coffee maker was a leather portfolio that looked distinctly corporate. She shouldn't snoop. She knew that. But 15 years in business had taught her that information was power, and something about this situation felt deliberately obscured. The portfolio was worn but well-maintained, and when she opened it, her heart skipped. Inside were business cards, presentation notes, and project summaries, all bearing the logo of Morrison & Associates, one of the biggest consulting firms in Chicago. Her biggest competitor. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was that all the materials had one name on them: M. Johnson, Senior Associate. "Find what you were looking for." Vanessa spun around to find Malik standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, caught red-handed going through his private things. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I was just cleaning up, and I saw." "You saw that I used to work in your world," Malik finished. "Morrison & Associates. 5 years, worked my way up from intern to senior associate before." He paused, studying her face. "Before I decided small-town life was more my speed." There was something in his tone, a bitterness carefully controlled, that made Vanessa's chest tighten. "Morrison & Associates is a good firm. Why did you leave?" Malik moved to the sink, began rinsing dishes with deliberate precision. "Sometimes the corporate world isn't what it appears to be. Sometimes good people get caught up in bad situations." He wasn't looking at her now, focused entirely on scrubbing a plate that was already clean. But Vanessa could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he was controlling his breathing. "You know corporate jargon pretty well for someone who's been out of the game," she said softly. "Some things stick with you," Malik replied. "Whether you want them to or not." The bus rumbled past outside, and Ava's laughter drifted through the window as she joined her classmates. In the sudden quiet of the kitchen, the weight of unspoken history pressed down on them both. Vanessa knew she should leave it alone, should focus on getting her car fixed and returning to her life. But something about Malik Johnson, about the careful way he spoke, the expensive coffee maker, the portfolio hidden behind domestic normalcy, made her think their meeting wasn't as random as it appeared. "I should call about my car," she said finally. Malik nodded, still not meeting her eyes. "Phone should work now. Tow truck's probably your best bet, Jerry's place on Route 9. But as Vanessa dialed the number he gave her, she couldn't shake the feeling that Malik was hoping she'd leave quickly. And in her experience, when someone wanted her gone that badly, it usually meant she was getting close to something they desperately wanted to keep hidden. The tow truck wouldn't arrive until late afternoon, something about clearing fallen trees from the county roads first. Vanessa found herself with an entire day to pass in Cedar Falls, a prospect that would have horrified her under normal circumstances. She was used to controlling her schedule down to the minute, not sitting around waiting for other people to solve her problems. But as the morning wore on, she discovered an unexpected peace in the rhythm of Malik's household. He moved through his daily routine with quiet efficiency, fixing a neighbor's leaky faucet, splitting firewood for the elderly woman next door, checking on storm damage around town. When he returned for lunch, he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was and what he was worth. You're well respected here, Vanessa observed as they sat down to sandwiches. Through the window, she'd watched Mrs. Henderson from across the street wave enthusiastically when Malik helped carry her groceries inside. Small towns are different, Malik said simply. People look out for each other. Your reputation matters because everybody knows everybody. There was something pointed in the way he said it, but Vanessa couldn't quite grasp what he meant. Must be nice, she said. In my world, people smile at you on Monday and try to steal your clients on Tuesday. Malik's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yeah, well, not everyone has the luxury of choosing their battles. Some people get their reputations destroyed by others who never bother to check if the rumors are true. The bitter edge in his voice made Vanessa look up sharply. That sounds personal. Everything's personal when it happens to you, Malik replied, then seemed to catch himself. Sorry. Just, corporate drama leave a bad taste, you know? After lunch, Malik excused himself to work on a cabinet repair for another neighbor, leaving Vanessa alone in the quiet house. She tried to work on her phone, checking emails, reviewing quarterly reports, but the peaceful atmosphere kept breaking her concentration. When had she last sat in genuine silence without the constant hum of city noise? Around 3 o'clock, she gave up on work entirely and wandered into the living room. The bookshelves were filled with an eclectic mix: children's stories, classic literature, business texts, and local history. She pulled out a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, thinking she might as well do something productive with her forced downtime. As she opened the book, a yellow newspaper clipping fluttered to the floor. Vanessa picked it up, intending to simply tuck it back into the pages, but the headline made her freeze. Corporate Internship Program Under Fire After Misconduct Allegations. The article was dated 8 years ago, and as she read, a cold knot formed in her stomach. It detailed a scandal at Clark Industries, her company, involving allegations of inappropriate behavior by an intern. The story mentioned an investigation, damaged reputations, and careers derailed by unsubstantiated rumors. But it was the grainy photo accompanying the article that made her blood run cold. A young man in a business suit, his face partially obscured but recognizable enough. The caption read, Marcus Johnson, 24, former intern at Clark Industries, maintains his innocence despite company decision to terminate employment. Marcus. Not Malik. But the face. Oh my God! She whispered. The front door opened, and she could hear Malik wiping his feet on the mat. How's the cabinet repair going? She called, quickly folding the clipping and slipping it into her pocket. Her voice sounded normal, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. Almost done, Malik replied from the kitchen. Jerry called. He should be here around 4 to pick up your car. Hopefully have it running by tomorrow morning. That's great news. Vanessa forced herself to walk casually into the kitchen, the newspaper clipping feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her pocket. I really appreciate everything you've done. This has been above and beyond. Malik was washing his hands at the sink, his back to her. Just doing what anyone would do. I don't think that's true, Vanessa said carefully. Not everyone would open their home to a complete stranger. Especially not someone like me. Someone like you? Malik turned around, and there was something different in his expression now, sharper, more focused. What's that supposed to mean, Ms. Clark? The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Ms. Clark. Not Vanessa, not the casual familiarity they'd maintained all day. Ms. Clark, formal and distant and laden with history. Vanessa's mouth went dry. I never told you my last name yesterday. Malik's face went completely still. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the kitchen island, and Vanessa could see the exact moment he realized his mistake. You must have mentioned it, he said finally, but the words lacked conviction. No, Vanessa said quietly. I didn't. I specifically remember introducing myself as just Vanessa because I wanted to be normal. Anonymous. Malik turned back to the sink, gripping the edge with both hands. His knuckles were white against his dark skin. You know who I am? Vanessa continued, her voice gaining strength. You've known since the moment I knocked on your door. Haven't you? The silence stretched between them, heavy with 8 years of history and pain and carefully buried truth. Outside, a dog barked somewhere in the distance, and the ordinary sound felt surreal against the weight of the moment. Yes, Malik said finally, not turning around. I know exactly who you are, Vanessa Clark, CEO of Clark Industries. The woman who built her empire on efficiency and decisive leadership. His voice was perfectly controlled, but she could hear the emotion underneath. The woman who destroyed my life without ever bothering to learn my name. The newspaper clipping seemed to burn in her pocket. Marcus Johnson, 24 years old. Terminated based on unsubstantiated rumors. Marcus, she whispered. Now he did turn around, and the look in his eyes made her step backward. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something deeper and more painful. Disappointment. Grief for what had been lost. Most people called me Mark back then, he said. But you never called me anything at all, did you? I was just the intern on the paperwork you signed. Vanessa's legs felt weak. She gripped the counter for support as fragments of memory began to surface. A promising young intern, whispered rumors in the break room, pressure from her supervisor to handle the situation quietly, before it became a larger scandal. She had signed the termination papers without ever speaking to him directly. I remember, she said, the words barely audible. There were allegations. Inappropriate behavior with a colleague. Allegations, Malik repeated, and now there was bitterness in his voice. Rumors started by someone who didn't like that I got promoted over them. Lies that you never bothered to investigate because it was easier to just cut me loose and protect the company's reputation. The weight of what she'd done, what they'd all done, crashed over her like a physical blow. A promising career destroyed. A young man's reputation ruined. All because it had been more convenient to believe the worst than to seek the truth. Malik, my name, he said quietly, was Marcus Johnson. And 8 years ago, you signed the papers that ended my career without ever looking me in the eye. Outside, the sound of a diesel engine announced Jerry's arrival with the tow truck. But neither of them moved toward the door. They stood frozen in the kitchen, separated by an island and 8 years of buried pain, while the ghosts of corporate decisions made in sterile conference rooms finally came home to roost. The tow truck's horn honked twice, but the sound felt distant and unreal. Vanessa stared at Marcus, trying to reconcile the man who had shown her such kindness with the faceless name on the termination papers she'd signed 8 years ago. I should go deal with Jerry, Malik said finally, his voice carefully neutral again. Your car won't fix itself. But as he moved toward the door, Vanessa found her voice. Wait. Please. He stopped, his hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. I need to understand what really happened, she said. I remember the basic facts, but I was getting pressure from Richard Morrison, my supervisor at the time. He said there were serious allegations, that we needed to act quickly to protect the company. I never got your side of the story. Malik's laugh was harsh and bitter. Of course you didn't. Why would you? I was just an intern. Disposable. That's not fair, Vanessa said, then immediately regretted the words. Nothing about what had happened to him was fair. Now Malik did turn around, and the look in his eyes made her stomach clench. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what really happened, Ms. Clark, since you never bothered to ask. The horn honked again, more insistently this time. Go, Vanessa said quietly. Handle the car. But when you come back, please. I need to know. Malik studied her face for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she was worth the emotional cost of reopening old wounds. Finally, he nodded curtly and headed outside. Through the kitchen window, Vanessa watched him talk to Jerry, a weathered man in coveralls who kept gesturing at her Mercedes and shaking his head. The conversation seemed animated but friendly. Malik was clearly well liked in this small community, respected in a way that corporate life had never offered him. When he returned 20 minutes later, his composure had been carefully rebuilt, but she could see the cracks in his armor. "Jerry says it's the alternator," he reported. "He'll have it fixed by tomorrow afternoon. You can stay another night if you want, or he can drive you to the bus station in Millfield." "I'd like to stay," Vanessa said carefully. "If that's okay with you. I think we have things to discuss." Malik nodded stiffly and moved to the coffee maker. "You want to know what really happened? Fine. But I'm only going through this once." He poured 2 cups of coffee with deliberate precision, his movements controlled but tense. When he finally sat down across from her at the kitchen table, his eyes were distant, as if he was looking back through time. "I was 24, he began. "Top of my MBA class, landed the internship at Clark Industries because I wanted to work for a company that actually made a difference. Your diversity initiative program specifically recruited people like me, first-generation college graduates from underrepresented communities." Vanessa remembered the program. It had been her idea, actually, born from a genuine desire to bring fresh perspectives into their overwhelmingly white, privileged corporate culture. "I worked 70-hour weeks," Malik continued. "Came in early, stayed late, volunteered for every project. I was hungry, you know. I believed in the meritocracy myth, that if I just worked hard enough, I could earn my place at the table." His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the coffee mug like a lifeline. "There was another intern, Bradley Chin. Rich kid, connected family, the kind of guy who never had to fight for anything in his life. We were both up for the same full-time position when the internship ended." Vanessa felt a chill of recognition. She remembered Bradley, charming, confident, the kind of golden boy who seemed destined for success. "I was ahead in every metric," Malik said. "Better performance reviews, stronger project results, more positive feedback from clients. It should have been a lock. But then the rumors started." "What kind of rumors?" Malik's jaw tightened. "That I'd been inappropriate with Sarah Kim, one of the junior associates. That I'd made unwanted advances, used my position to pressure her. Complete lies, but they spread like wildfire through the office." Vanessa's memory was sharpening now, pieces clicking into place. "I remember Sarah. She was troubled about something. Nervous. She was terrified," Malik said bluntly. "Because Bradley had been harassing her for months, and when she finally worked up the courage to report it, he convinced her to blame me instead. Told her that a complaint against him would go nowhere because of his family connections, but that she could get rid of the troublemaker in turn and still get justice." The words hit Vanessa like physical blows. "How do you know this?" "Because she told me," Malik said quietly. 3 years later, when the guilt finally ate her alive. She tracked me down, apologized, explained everything. But by then, it was too late. My career was over, my reputation destroyed. No one in corporate consulting would touch me." Vanessa felt sick. Why didn't she come forward at the time? Why didn't she tell the truth? Because she was a 26-year-old woman in a male-dominated industry, and Bradley Chen's father sat on the board of 3 Fortune 500 companies, Malik said. Because speaking truth to power is a luxury not everyone can afford. The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the wall clock and the distant sound of children playing outside, normal life continuing while the weight of past injustices pressed down on them both. "I tried to defend myself," Malik continued. "Asked for a formal investigation, requested to face my accuser, demanded evidence. But Richard Morrison said the company couldn't risk the liability of a full investigation. Better to quietly eliminate the problem before it became a public scandal." Vanessa remembered that conversation now with horrible clarity. Morrison had been persuasive, practical. Why risk a harassment lawsuit when they could simply choose not to hire the intern? Clean, efficient, legally sound. "So you signed the papers," Malik said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Without ever asking to hear my side. Without ever looking me in the eye. You just erased me." "I trusted Morrison's judgment," Vanessa said weakly. "I thought he'd done his due diligence. You trusted the system that benefited you, Malik corrected. The same system that chewed me up and spit me out because I was expendable and Bradley Chin wasn't. Outside, Ava's laughter drifted through the window as the school bus dropped her off. In a few minutes, she would burst through the front door with homework and stories about her day, bringing light and innocence into a conversation that had grown heavy with the weight of buried truth. I destroyed your life, Vanessa said finally, the words barely audible. Malik looked at her for a long moment, and she saw not anger in his eyes, but something far more devastating, profound disappointment in the person she had chosen to be. Yes, he said simply. You did. The front door burst open with the enthusiasm only an 8-year-old could muster, and Ava's voice filled the heavy silence that had settled over the kitchen like fog. Daddy, I got a gold star on my math test. And Mrs. Peterson said my essay about community helpers was the best in the class. She stopped short when she saw their faces, her natural intuition picking up on the tension. Is everything okay? Malik's transformation was immediate and complete. The pain in his eyes vanished, replaced by the warm smile he reserved for his daughter. That's wonderful, baby. I'm so proud of you. But Vanessa could see the effort it took, the way he held his shoulders just a little too straight, the careful control in his voice. Why don't you go start your homework? He suggested. I'll be up to help you in a few minutes. Ava looked between them uncertainly, then nodded and headed upstairs, her footsteps lighter than the atmosphere she'd left behind. When they were alone again, Malik stood and moved to the sink, his back to Vanessa. After you fired me, I spent 6 months applying for jobs. Every interview went the same way. They'd be interested until they called Clark Industries for a reference. Then suddenly the position would be filled or they'd found a more qualified candidate. Vanessa watched his reflection in the window above the sink. His face was composed, but his hands gripped the counter with white knuckles. I burned through my savings, had to move back in with my mother. She was sick then, diabetes complications, and couldn't work. I ended up taking whatever jobs I could find. Construction, delivery driving, anything that didn't require a corporate reference. The casual way he said it made the devastation worse somehow. No drama, no self-pity, just the quiet recitation of a life derailed. Then I met Elena, he continued, and his voice softened slightly. She was a teacher at the elementary school where I was doing maintenance work. She saw something in me that the corporate world couldn't, or wouldn't. We got married 2 years later. Vanessa found her voice. She sounds wonderful. She was. Malik turned around, and the grief in his eyes was raw and fresh despite the years. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed when Ava was 3, gone 6 months later. Fast and brutal and completely unfair. The weight of his losses, career, wife, the future he'd planned, pressed down on the kitchen like a physical presence. Vanessa thought of her own life, insulated by money and success from the kind of devastating randomness that had shaped his. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Elena made me promise to stay here, in Cedar Falls, Malik said. She said Ava needed roots, stability, a community that would know her name and watch out for her. She was right. This place saved us both. He moved to the refrigerator, straightening one of Ava's drawings, a crayon masterpiece of stick figures under a rainbow. I do good work here. People trust me, depend on me. Mrs. Henderson brings me cookies every Christmas. The Millers call me when their furnace acts up. Ava has friends who've known her since kindergarten. It sounds like a good life, Vanessa said carefully. It is. Malik's voice was firm. Different from what I planned, but good. Honest. Real in a way that corporate success never was. The silence stretched between them again, but it felt different now, less hostile, more contemplative. I need you to know something, Vanessa said finally. What happened to you? It changed me. Not immediately, not all at once, but over the years. I've thought about that decision more times than I can count. I instituted new policies, required investigations, created oversight committees. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, but it helped other people. Malik finished. Other interns who might have faced the same choice between their word and someone with more power. Yes. Malik studied her face, as if trying to decide whether she was telling the truth or just trying to ease her conscience. Good, he said finally. That matters. Does it? Does any of it matter when I can't give you back what you lost? You can't give me back Elena, Malik said quietly. You can't give me back the career I planned or the life I thought I'd have. But those policies you mentioned? They probably saved someone else from going through what I did. That has to count for something. Upstairs, they could hear Ava moving around, the ordinary sounds of a child doing homework and living her life. Outside, the day was fading into evening, and the warm light from the kitchen windows made the house feel like a sanctuary against the approaching darkness. I need you to understand something, Malik said, his voice gaining strength. I didn't let you stay here to torture you or to get some kind of revenge. I let you stay because that's who I choose to be now. The corporate world tried to make me bitter and small, but I won't let it win. How do you do it? Vanessa asked. How do you choose kindness after everything that happened? Malik glanced toward the stairs where his daughter was working on her homework, and his expression softened. Because Ava is watching. Because this town is watching. Because the person Elena fell in love with wasn't defined by what other people did to him, but by who he chose to be in response. I don't know if I could be that strong. You could, Malik said simply. You already have been. The policies you changed, the systems you fixed, that took courage too. Different kind of strength, maybe, but strength all the same. The admission hung between them like a bridge across 8 years of pain and misunderstanding. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something more complex. Recognition of the flawed humanity they both carried, the choices that had shaped them, and the possibility that even the worst mistakes could become catalysts for something better. Dawn came clear and bright to Cedar Falls, the storm-washed air carrying the promise of new beginnings. Vanessa woke to the sound of Ava's laughter drifting up from the kitchen, mixed with Malik's deeper voice as they prepared breakfast together. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to wake up to such sounds every day, to belong to something warm and real instead of returning to her sterile penthouse apartment. But reality intruded quickly. Jerry would arrive soon with her repaired car, and she would return to her world of board meetings and quarterly projections, leaving Cedar Falls and its revelations behind. When she came downstairs, Ava was at the table eating pancakes while Malik packed her school lunch with the practiced efficiency of a single parent. Good morning, Vanessa said, and was surprised by how natural it felt to be part of their morning routine. Morning, Ava chirped. Daddy says your car is fixed and you're going back to the big city today. That's sad. I liked having you here. The simple honesty of it made Vanessa's chest tight. When was the last time anyone had said they enjoyed her company without wanting something from her? I like being here too, she said, and meant it completely. Malik glanced at her over Ava's head, and she saw something shift in his expression, a softening she hadn't expected after yesterday's painful revelations. After Ava left for school, they sat at the kitchen table with coffee and the weight of unfinished business. Outside, Jerry's tow truck rumbled up to the curb, her Mercedes gleaming on the flatbed like a symbol of the life waiting to reclaim her. Before you go, Vanessa said, pulling out her phone, I need to make you an offer. And I need you to hear me out before you say no. Malik's eyebrows rose, but he remained silent. Clark Industries is expanding our community development division, she said, her words carefully prepared but delivered with growing conviction. We're looking for someone to head up rural economic initiatives, someone who understands both corporate strategy and small-town values. The position would be based here, in Cedar Falls. You'd travel occasionally, but Ava could stay in her school, keep her friends. She pulled up the job description she'd drafted on her phone during the sleepless hours before dawn. The salary is competitive with what you would have made as a senior associate 8 years ago, adjusted for inflation and experience. Full benefits, education fund for Ava, and complete autonomy over your projects. Malik listened without interruption, his face carefully neutral. The position reports directly to me, Vanessa continued. No middle management, no Richard Morrisons who can twist the truth to serve their own purposes. You'd have the resources to make real change in communities like this one. When she finished, the kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the wall clock and the distant sound of Jerry working on her car. It sounds like a good opportunity, Malik said finally. But I don't want your pity, Vanessa. I don't want a job created out of guilt or some misguided attempt at redemption. Vanessa leaned forward, meeting his eyes directly. This isn't pity. This is business. I need someone who understands corporate systems but hasn't been corrupted by them. Someone who knows what it's like when those systems fail people. Someone who's built something real with his own hands and understands what communities actually need. She paused, gathering her courage for what came next. 8 years ago, I made a decision based on incomplete information and corporate convenience. It was wrong, and it had devastating consequences. I can't undo that. But I can make sure that your expertise, your perspective, shapes how we approach community development going forward. Malik was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup as if it held answers to questions he hadn't yet formed. What would Elena think? Vanessa asked softly. The question seemed to surprise him. He looked up, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression. She always said I was meant for bigger things, he said quietly. That Cedar Falls saved me, but maybe someday I could save other places too. Outside, Jerry knocked on the door. Car's ready, he called. Running like new. Neither of them moved toward the door. I need time to think about it, Malik said. Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, writing her personal cell phone number on the back. Take all the time you need. The offer stands whether you call tomorrow or next year. She stood to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, I think Elena was right. You are meant for bigger things. The question is whether you're ready to believe that again. As she gathered her things and prepared to return to her corporate life, Vanessa found herself hoping, really hoping, that Malik would find the courage to take the leap. Not for her sake, or even for his, but for all the communities that needed someone who understood both power and powerlessness, success and failure, the cost of dreams deferred and the possibility of second chances. The Mercedes purred to life as Jerry handed her the keys, the engine sounds smooth and expensive against the quiet morning air. But as she drove away from Cedar Falls, Vanessa found herself looking in the rearview mirror until Malik's house disappeared around a bend in the road. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with messages from her assistant, her board members, her world calling her back. But her mind remained in a modest kitchen where a man she'd wronged had chosen kindness over bitterness, and where a little girl had urged her father to believe in second chances. The story wasn't finished yet. The real ending would be written in whatever choice Malik made when he looked at that business card and decided whether the risk of hope was worth the possibility of disappointment once again. Behind her, Cedar Falls settled into its daily rhythm, and somewhere in a quiet house, a single father held a piece of paper that might change everything, or might simply be tucked away with the other remnants of dreams that corporate America had taught him to bury. The choice, finally, was his.